This meeting is being recorded.
Hey, and welcome to the next episode of Writers Talk, a series in which I talk to writers about, well, writing, only not today because we're still in Pride Month. And as a change to the, as it were, scheduled programming, instead of me and Tim talking about cucumber, which, you know, we may do one day, we're going to keep going with the theme, I suppose, tone of the last 3 videos, in that we're going to talk about gay experiences, not Tim's, obviously, because he's not, unless he's keeping a secret. No.
I have had a few, but I'm not going to talk about them.
Oh, okay. We'll do that next year. So instead, what we're going to do, since I am the token gay, can you be token when there's only 2 people? Probably not.
I think you're doing yourself an injustice there. I think if you're the token gay, then I'm the token hetero. So
but there we go. See, we're tokens.
Token.
Cool.
Yes.
Well, we're cashing our change now. So yes, we're going to do obviously a very off the cuff, clearly, where Tim's going to actually grill me about my experiences, and I don't know what he's going to ask me. So here we go, Tim.
Right.
Away. I shall just follow this time.
Yeah. Well, I figured I wouldn't concentrate.
I'm ready.
Okay. I figured I wouldn't concentrate too heavily on kind of standard kind of questions about when you came out and all of that, those kind of things, and also because this, in essence, is a writer's talk anyway. So I'm hoping that a lot of that will come out through the discussion. So I've tailored some of the questions that way, but I thought I'd just start off with a couple of general questions anyway.
It's like QI now, isn't it?
Do you have
general ingredients? Come.
Do you have a favorite work of literature?
I have several.
Okay,
I do have quite a few.
Me too.
It does change depending on mood, because, you know, like yourself, read a lot of stuff over the decade. There was a time when there was much of Doctor Who literature was among my faves, but as you get older, I think your tastes expand, just like it does with food. You know, your palate changes. Some stuff stays in my head, like, say, John Connolly, who's right in front of me. He is absolutely among one of my absolute favorite authors. I don't know if I could signpost a single one of his books, though. If I was going to, it's lucky they're in front of me, I would actually go for his first, Every Dead Thing. It's just something really good about it. It's a kind of thriller, crime-esque thing, which is essentially initially about this former detective who's now a private investigator, whose family, his wife and daughter, were killed by some serial killer. And it's basically him dealing with that and tracking down, I think it's The Traveling Man. It's a long time since I read this book. I am listening to the audiobook because it's fun to really listen to stuff that I've read before, because I don't have to reread. But there's something about his prose. As the series goes on, it starts off quite a grim crime thriller type, but then it goes in a very supernatural tone and themes as it goes on. And there's something quite poetic about his prose. And yeah, he's up there. Speaking of particular books directly, obviously H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds is absolutely one of my favorites. I've read that countless times. Other stuff that's stuck with me through the years, Anne Rice's, see, I'm actually looking at my bookcases, so I've got them all over the house, it seems. Memnoch the Devil, which I appear not to have a copy up there. Where's it gone?
Ooh, mystery.
Where is it? It's probably on my shelf.
You lent it to someone, have you?
No, God, no. I would have definitely kept it. I kept like 4 of her books. It's probably on the shelf somewhere. Or maybe I lent it to somebody. That rings a vague bell. I may have to get a new copy. Oh well.
Okay.
But that sticks with me for that's a book that stuck with me because back in the day, during my what I call the wilderness years, back in my time as a Christian, I eventually fell out of it because I had certain things that I couldn't quite articulate, but I knew was in my head, doubts and questions and whatnot. And when I read that book, through the narrative of the devil taking the stat through a tour of hell, essentially, at creation and heaven stuff, Anne Rice unusually actually posed and answered a lot of questions that I was struggling with. So that's always stuck with me. So I'm surprised I don't have a copy, but I do recall lending it to somebody. But I can't
your wilderness years then, when you, you know, you were obviously sort of toying with
this one isn't written down, is it?
No, it's not. This is off the cuff. This is me making it up as I go along.
Excellent.
Eat your heart out, Michael Parkinson. So did your sort of questioning of faith in that way, did that have anything to do with your own sort of innate sense of your sexuality?
Probably, yeah, looking back. It's funny. I always say this when I just talk about this to various people, because majority of people don't necessarily notice I'm gay when I first met me, because I don't necessarily come across as such, not stereotypically anyway. Once you get to know me,
you're not that stereotypical kind of camp gay, which is good, because it's you can't have a one size fits all perception of what it is to be a gay man, and
absolutely.
So that's
good. So you know, whenever people find out, we end up conversations, like say if it's an older person, for instance, they've never known a gay man, let's say, so they have lots of questions. So I'll answer them as honestly as I can. I often say, I also look back and I can see many instances in the past where it's obvious now that I was, I suppose, struggling on some level with my own sexuality, even though maybe at the time I didn't know it. But looking back, so many instances where I'm like, well, yeah, obviously now, because hindsight's an amazing thing. So I think in some ways there was definitely a link between my own struggling sexuality and my so-called faith. I don't know if I could really say faith. I suppose it was at the time, but awakening, I suppose, just to bring it Doctor Who. Yeah, I think there was a connection. Ironically, because I look back and there was definitely a guy, and it's so obvious now that we were really good friends, so I'm not going to mention a name, so it could be one of several people who may watch this. I'm not mentioning names, so they'll never know if it's them or it's somebody else. There was one particular guy who I absolutely had a thing for, and it's so obvious. So many instances where I'm like, well, yeah, obviously. But yeah, so I think it probably is connected. Yeah, which is probably why to this day I have a very hard time not accepting Christianity as such, but certainly doubting its integrity based on my own experiences. So yeah, I think there was definitely a linkage.
Interesting. Well, having been off-piste, I'm going to go back onto the list now.
Okay, no peace.
So,
yeah. One glass, so I'm okay. I'm not off-piste, honestly.
Which of your own works are you most proud of? Now, not necessarily that you think is the best, but which other works are you most proud of? Do you think that's an achievement? You know.
I'm glad you didn't say best, because best changes a lot.
Best is a horrible question. I've been asked that before. Like, I hate it.
Like Nick Walters often says, each time he writes a new book, as you will find out, you'll be, I think this is my best work, which is a valid point of view at the time, because you think as a writer, you produce your best work each time. I mean, if you're writing a new piece of work and it's not as good as something you wrote in the past, then I think there's a problem, I would say, inherently. If you're not making your best work at the time. So best is subjective. Yeah, best is very much how you feel at the time. Proud of is tough. If I've got to lay it down to one work, as opposed to elements of, because obviously there's elements throughout. This is a toughie. You get back to me on this? No, I will answer this.
I can do if you are.
No,
You may not have an answer.
At the books on the shelf eventually, because I've got the Leper Stewart and the boast shelf, as the authors call it, about me.
Yep.
It's here. It used to be out of the way, but now it's it's no point out on boast shelf where people can't see it, right?
Exactly.
God, it really is difficult. You know what? I'm going to go with Seeker, which I don't actually have a copy of. I lent it to somebody again. I've not seen it for ages. I've lent so many copies of it, and this particular copy I found in a charity shop. So I thought, oh, I'll buy my own book because I don't have a copy of it. I don't have a copy of it again now. Probably why Candy Jar and I eventually we're going to release a new version of it, because it'd be nice to have it on my shelf to stay on my shelf.
Yes. Nail it down next time.
Yeah, really. I get a few copies, so I'd say Seeker because it was my first novel. Initially self-published, but then a publisher picked it up, so that was good. As it turned out, very dodgy publisher, but that's by the by. And it did get nominated in 2011 for the Rainbow Award for Best Supernatural Gay Fiction. It didn't win, but it got a honorable
nomination. Is good.
So yeah, I'll take that. I think I'm more proud. That's probably my most proud moment because, as John Connolly would say, and he told me once, your first book usually contains everything you're ever going to write. All the themes, all the character types you're ever going to write about are usually in your first book. And then you'll go back to them in various ways throughout, presumably your career, if you end up having one. And that is very true. Pretty much every type of character and theme and trope and whatever, it's all there. All there.
Interesting.
Not my best work, not by a chalk. I mean, that's 2000. My first draft was 2008, so it was a long time ago. Yeah. But I'd say I'm most proud of it because I got it done and it led to so much other stuff. And it was the first time that I felt properly able to explore a lot of themes and indeed not autobiographical, but certainly elements from my life and people I knew and whatever. I was able to finally get it out there. So I'd say that's probably my most proud moment as a piece of work. Not necessarily my best, but when it comes out again, people can read it and they'll be like, huh. Although the new version is slightly updated, so it should hopefully be a bit better. I may even do book 2 eventually. People do keep asking me for it.
This is good.
12 years later.
Good. You got it. Yeah. If they're asking for it, you better deliver.
I think so. Anyway, yes.
So the original suggestion for this conversation was obviously that maybe we'd watch something like what you suggested, Cucumber. So I've been thinking about that, and do you feel that gay discourse is normalized anywhere within the arts? Because, for example, on TV, it seems to me that inclusive dramas are still promoted for their inclusivity rather than their story, and also it seems that their inclusivity is often their story. Yeah. So that's my perception anyway.
I don't think we're there yet. No. It's nice to believe we are, and I think I've said this a few times over the last few weeks. I think as a culture, certainly in the UK, we are more or less kind of there now on some levels that most people don't care anymore. They're fair accepting. It's like, well, you're gay, so cool, whatever. You're trans, cool, whatever. Well, trans is probably, it's not new, obviously, but it's certainly people are still struggling with it, I think, as in not trans people necessarily, but people outside of the trans community, for want of a better term.
Yeah, struggling to accept.
It still feels new to them. I mean, it's not, obviously, it's always been around. But no, I think in terms of fiction and the arts, well, clearly, like you said, the inclusivity is always a key point. It's always a selling point. I mean, look at this. When Ncuti got announced as the Doctor, him being presumably a gay actor. It certainly seems to be that he is. I can't find anything that says he definitely is, but the implication seemed to be that he is, and certainly the press seemed to go with that. It still became a huge deal. You know, still, it's, as you say, it's a story. And, you know, when we've done some Leffer Stewart stuff with like Owen or Dylan or Connell, you know, and a few others, I've tried most of the time, and it's kind of worked, to not make a thing of it. You know, Owen just exists. It's never been a story about him being gay, necessarily, or any of the novels have been about any gay issues per se. But when, you know, the response from certain people still clearly shows that it's not normal. I mean, I'm not going to signpost the person, obviously, but I do know a particular reader, because I was told this, that he took a lot of umbrage to An Ordinary Man, because I don't, you know, you may have heard this already from somebody. Again, not naming names. That this particular fan, I say fan, reader, whatever, he took a little bit of umbrage at the fact that there was gay sex in it, even though there wasn't. There was implications.
Right. Yeah, no, I wasn't aware of that.
Because, you know, there's that stuff where Owen has his one night with.
Oh, don't look at me.
Oh
no, but I know the scene down on the beach.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who was it?
Oh, for God's sake!
Brr.
2 writers in search of a character name. This is ridiculous.
I could just remember. But anyway, the character, I want to say it's not JB, because that's what he gets with Dylan. It's there's a character in there. I'm sure it's a character that exists already.
Ooh, sorry.
Hello. I'm sure there's a character. I'm sure there's a character that existed in the Prime, as it were, universe. I feel sure.
Yeah.
But you know, I wrote this, and you co-wrote. But anyway, there was a thing where he goes and meets with him for one night before he goes off on this mission with Archie, and he's obviously feels it at the end of it. And he, you know, and the particular reader in question took a lot of umbrage at that, which is kind of odd.
That was a lovely scene. Even
I thought so. Certainly,
even
you never see it. You know, it's obviously implied that they had a very intimate encounter on their last night together. And, you know, we're talking both of them were 17, 18, so, you know, technically legal. Well, nowadays anyway, legal. But yeah, and then of course there's that coming out scene later where he comes out to Archie, I believe, which was literally the first time and possibly the only time we've ever really, as it were, dealt with such the issue, as it were, in a Leffer Stewart book. Right, which to me says the fact that you still get those kind of reactions, that no, when it's not normalized. It should be.
Have some work to do.
Absolutely should be, but I mean, it's a toughie, because I think from a writing point of view, majority of people who write these sort of things, like Russell T Davies and obviously so many of us, we don't write it necessarily to be salacious or to make a point, but the people who read it or the people who produce it or the press and so on that still keep making this big, you know, issue. And marketing obviously makes, as you say, they use it to sell the product. When you get it all the time, like Ms. Marvel, it's, you know, she's first so-called Muslim superhero, and it's such a big selling point when it shouldn't be. You know, it's a weird one, because this world, minorities, whatever, you know, which is in itself is awful as a word, be it sexually, gender, ethnic background, whatever, it's still clearly an issue that this culture is still struggling with on some level. And it shouldn't be, obviously it shouldn't be, but it's a toughie, because representation is absolutely key, I think. You know, everybody wants to feel represented, everybody wants to be able to relate to. But then you've got the press and publicity departments and whatnot who make such a point of it that it becomes abnormal in some ways, even though it's not. So I don't know.
Yes,
Yeah.
to a certain extent, a lot of it comes down to I think to media. It's the media affecting people's perceptions of the way that a lot of these issues and representations are covered, because it's the media leading the average person in the street by the nose to a certain extent.
But I would add, and this is very much my opinion, and a lot of people don't agree, but that's okay. You know, a lot of people do agree. I am very much of the opinion, and I've argued this with many people before, and I can understand the reverse counter argument on it, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but my personal opinion is, to me, it feels like the so-called LGBTQIA+, I can't even keep a track of numbers, it works against its own interests sometimes, I think. Example, to me, the idea of the gay nightclub, gay pubs, gay cafe, gay this, whatever it's called, what you want to call it, which I struggle with the idea, because I can understand the need on some level for a safe space for people, because I think that's how it all began. You know, that people had a safe space where they could be themselves without fear of recriminations or people from the outside that were coming in and attacking them or whatever. Absolutely.
Yes, judging them and stuff. Yes.
This makes perfect sense, and that is absolutely where it all began. But it's come to the point where I feel that you're basically self-segregating yourself now, where by having these groups and these pubs and clubs and whatnot, you're actually saying we're different from you. You're not welcome.
So it's not helping the integration.
No, it's kind of
the normalization.
It's just it's not creating a problem, but it's certainly exacerbating a problem that really exists. You know, until we're at a stage where there's just nightclubs again and just pubs again and whatever again, where everybody's welcome regardless. So I think it's not I say they, as in the places. I think the people who go to such places, at least, I feel sometimes they kind of not creating their own problem, but they're certainly keeping it going. You know, I don't think we'll ever get to the point where we can go beyond that until, you know, you can't normalize something if you keep making it exceptional. You keep making it different, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can't see any easy solution to it either. You know, that's why I say it. So for me, and again, it's absolutely my personal opinion, I don't tend to go to such places because I'm like, well, look, if I'm going to be a gay man who's going to hopefully show the world how normal it is, then you have to act normal. And by normal, I mean just the same as everybody else. Not that you're hiding who you are, but you're being around them, being who you are, and they're seeing, oh no, that's perfectly normal because it's no different than how I am. You know, he's a gay man, I'm a straight guy, but you know, beyond that, who cares? We're still people. So I think that's certainly the way I do it. Anyway, that's to normalize things for me personally is just to be just a regular guy who happens to like men. You know, it's not my defining attribute. And when people find out, they're usually quite surprised by it. And then we get a conversation going because people are a bit like, didn't see that. Why did I not see that? And then you can just kind of make it normal by being who you are. So I don't know, it's, as I say, there's no easy solution to it because I totally understand why these places exist. For certain people, I can see why they would gravitate to such places, but I don't think it's ever going to fix the problem of normality as long as they continue to exist. So again, absolutely my opinion, and everybody is free to differ, and I'm sure many people will, violently probably.
It's actually funny that you brought up that scene on the beach from An Ordinary Man earlier, because my next question was, have you ever found yourself imprinting your own experiences when you're reading a particularly evocative passage in a work? I'm not suggesting that your experience was on the beach, but I remember as I was working on that scene as well, because I know it was one that I started and you basically took and finished off. I tried to approach it as I would a romantic scene,
Yeah.
as I would understand it from a heterosexual perspective, because I thought surely the underlying feelings are no different.
Well, no, they're not any different. I mean, the only difference, not to be crude, is the physical acts. You know,
Yes.
even then, they're not that different, really. But no, I mean, emotionally, of course, why would it be any different? I mean, the only difference is, for certainly in the 1970s and sadly still today, is that a lot of LGBTQAI, I'm sure I'm getting the numbers in the wrong order, they still feel often the need to hide or suppress or keep it a bit on the down low. So I think that's probably the only real difference, even with that scene, because that scene was very much about they met in a very secluded place because they had to, you know.
Yeah.
Do I feel myself? Yeah, I think we all do. Because, you know, as we say, you know, emotion, we all have the same emotions, you know, the emotional range. Most of us have the same emotional range anyway. I can watch and read any kind of, you know, as if it's something that equates with my personal experience, then yeah, it doesn't have to be, oh, well, they're straight, so I don't get it. You know, like, well, I get the fundamental emotional story. You know, God, if I didn't get it, then I would never be able to write straight characters. You know what I mean? A majority of the characters I've written for are straight.
Yeah, that's true.
It's no different. You know, human nature, desire, just fundamentally how we are as people. There's no difference, and you know, obviously shouldn't be any difference. So yeah, I relate to all kinds, and sometimes, like if it's gay literature, which I don't read a great deal of, to be fair, or indeed gay TV, because again, I try to just watch stuff that includes all, as opposed to a specific to a particular audience. You know, there's stuff I can relate to. Sometimes I can watch stuff I'm like, yeah, that's way beyond my experience. Like, you know, for instance, say in Cucumber and the banana, the companion series, I suppose you'd call it. There's so much in those series and the experiences these characters have, and I'm like, this is totally unrelatable to me. But there's certain things that absolutely, I mean, the episode that we were going to watch if we ever got around to it, but I don't think you would have seen it, but essentially the scenario is you've got one of the gay characters who's not married, but they've been together for a long time. He starts to sort of have a little fling with a straight, not a personal coach, he might, something similar, personal coach, or he's into fitness, whatever's. And this guy, straight guy, is obviously dipping his toe in the world of kind of interest in this guy suddenly. And it so freaks him out because he can't equate it in his head, these kind of emotions and the carnal interests. Ultimately, he gets to a point where in this particular scene, the gay guy, I can't remember the character's name, he's at the straight guy's house and they're going to, you know, get jiggy with it, they say. Or they used to say, I don't think they say that anymore.
I've said it for a while, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, I've got lots of old phrases. But yeah, so there's this scene where stuff's going to happen and the straight guy is still in his very like, kind of self-hatred, I suppose, in a sense, that he can feel this attraction to this guy, but he can't emotionally handle it because it's so against the way he's been raised, I suppose, or just the way his own personal circle, you know, to the point where he basically ends up smacking a guy on the back of the head with a club, I seem to recall something, and basically kills the guy because he just can't deal with it. And he gets away with it because, you know, unfortunately, as Russell says, you know, like in Queer's Folk, people do awful things every day and get away with it, you know. And I watched that scene and I'm like, I know a lot of people are like, can this really happen? Does this really happen? I'm like, yeah, I know it happens because years back, there was this straight dude who, well, he says he's straight, but clearly not entirely, who developed this very big thing for me. this back in Southend. So again, some people watching it may be able to put two and two together because they'll remember certain elements of this. He became quite obsessed with me. And it got very odd, got very weird. He was clearly very attracted to me. And at one point, he was a bit drunk. And he said to me, "Oh, I love you as if you was a woman." Because that's the only way his head could, deal with it.
Okay.
Yeah,
fair enough.
And then, of course, things happened or not happened, almost happened. And he got into this big denial mode where he got quite aggressive and very angry and hateful, mostly at himself, but he's projecting outwards at me. So I kind of received a lot of it, not physically, but stuff like I'd be outside work. I was working on the seafront, and he'd drive past in the car with somebody, and he'd be shouting out all kinds of abuse at me. And I'm just there like, but because he couldn't handle it, he could not deal with these feelings they had. So when I watched that scene in Cucumber years later, I'm like, yeah, I can totally see, because I didn't know this sort of crap unfortunately does happen all the time. So yes, I often read stuff and kind of imprint, because we all do, as I say, emotions, just human behavior, we all have it, and there's no difference, and there shouldn't be,
Okay. Who do you write for, or who do you see as your audience?
Well, I think mostly me. I think most of us write for ourselves at the end of the day.
I think that's probably a good answer, yeah.
Let's be honest, we all
write the sort of stuff you like to read.
Yeah, I think so. This is why, like we say, Left with Stuart, for instance, and this is a conversation that Sean and I have had a few times. Like, there's certain books in the series, for instance, that he likes and some he doesn't like, because that's just it's not his kind of story. Ditto myself, there's a lot of stories that I've commissioned that will not necessarily be the sort of thing that I would personally go out and buy. But as Gary Russell once said to me, because I remember asking him what would he do if he was producer of Doctor Who, I think, somewhere along those lines. Do you get to make Doctor Who that you like? And he's like, oh, no. Because he was talking about his status as Big Finish head honcho. And he said to me, he's like, no. If I just made stuff that I liked, then it'd be a very limited audience. We'd only sell certain, because obviously there's only so many people that like what I like. His goal was to make and produce stories that other people like too. So with Left with Stuart, for instance, I often commission stuff that I'm like, well, I know there's a market for this sort of story. It's not my kind of story, but that's okay. So I think, and we all, under that, I would say we all essentially write for ourselves. We all write what we like. I certainly, the stories I tell are very much stories that appeal to me, which obviously means it must appeal to other people, because obviously there's other people that like what I like. Like some of the stuff you write, it's not always my bag, but I'm sure you write because it's a story you like to tell, you like to explore, character, story, whatever. So I think, honestly, and any author who's being honest, we write for ourselves ultimately. I suppose if you're hired to write for a TV show, then you have a certain target audience in mind. And if you're just a writer, you obviously have to write to a certain spec to a point. Yeah. But even then, you're still going to be writing stories that you would like to watch or like to read, I think. It's like when I come to you, oftentimes we'll say, well, I need a story for so and here's a few bits I need you to include. You're then going to write a story, not necessarily, you're not going to write a story that I'm going to like necessarily. You're going to write a story that you will enjoy telling because it's a story you would like to read with these elements put in it anyway, So I think ultimately, like everybody, I think I write primarily for me. I write stories that I want to tell. I deal with characters that I find interesting. I look at themes that fascinate me.
That's interesting that you should say that, because the next question I had actually was do you consider it your duty to write stories and create characters that openly challenge heterosexual norms? And that kind of
yes,
kind of follows from what you were.
I think
saying,
so.
Really,
because I know you hear this all the time when a new writer is writing for Doctor Who or whatever the franchise, because it's mostly franchise stuff these days, let's be fair. Like when Russell was in charge, he had the gay agenda, and of course at the moment he's a savior of Doctor Who again. But I'm pretty sure once he's settled back in, there'll be the bitching and the moaning about his gay agenda.
Yes. Again. Why is it all about the gays?
Yes.
Blah, blah, blah.
And people seem to have forgotten that. They've forgotten all these things that they were bitching about back in the mid 2000s. And they'll remember again soon enough, once they've got the Chibnall hate out of their system, it'd be Russell's turn again. But, so I think, yes, we all have an agenda on some level, be it political or whatever it is. I suppose everything's political on some level. So yeah, I think when I'm writing, I do try to have at least some gay characters in it. Like Leper Stewart, even though it's set in the 70s, from the off, Owen was introduced in book 1, and it wasn't blatantly clear, but if you pay attention, it's there. There's a couple of lines between him and his dad, for instance, having a conversation, where it's very obvious. If you look back, you'll be like, oh, yeah, it was there from day one, And of course, later on, it's less subtle. And that's true when I did Space 89 series. This one just, it's really difficult doing backwards. That one there.
That one there.
What's there?
There it is, yeah. I can see it.
So weird. Looking through a mirror, that was very weird. This one here, this one here, that was very weird. Oh, geez. Yeah, see, you have to try to watch yourself from camera. Like, what are you pointing? I don't know. Anyway, yeah. Even in the Space 89 series, which is set in 1889, as the title suggests, I still had a gay character in that. But of course, you have to do it in a very different way because it's a very different culture back then,
Yeah.
But from the off, the first time you meet this character, Nathaniel, he has a little diary entry where he's talking about he would like to have a chat to the preacher from his church, Reverend Matthews, who may or may not be the same one from Ghost Light. Probably was. Actually, it totally was. He's from Oxford. He was the dean of Oxford College, and all this. It's very intentional. Anyway, about why has God made him wrong? So it's there from the off, because of course, in the 1880s, that's kind of how you would have saw things. Based on historical evidence, anyway. So it's always there throughout, and then eventually it comes out to certain people. Some respond well to it. Personally, he becomes a very good friend over the course of the series. He finds out, and he's disgusted by the idea, absolutely horrified by the idea. And I know at the time people were like, "How do you write that?" Because and of course, then you get, and you may have received this too, certain critics, certain readers. If there's a homophobic character, I suppose, a lot of the readers I've had response from some people will assume, oh, you must be homophobic because you're writing homophobic characters. It's like, well, no, I'm just exploring different angles of a issue,
Yes.
I'm going to say no more gay than because I create a gay character, but obviously I'm gay. But not necessarily. A straight guy could create a gay character, create a homophobic character. It doesn't mean he, as a writer or she, lands on either side of the issue. They're just exploring the issue. And to explore an issue within fiction, because all fiction ultimately is about exploring issues on some level. Everything's, all themes, be it love, be it hate, be it politics, gender identity, racism, just everything in the entire world, is an issue that fiction deals with on some level. I mean, that's what fiction is all about, ultimately, about mirroring the real world on some level to be able to deal with stuff that sometimes you can't talk about in person because, unfortunately, there's a lot of tribal nonsense going on these days, in particular nowadays, it seems. You're in one camp or the other. There's no middle ground, which is a real shame. But in fiction, you can at least deal with that middle ground a bit more. So absolutely put that in pretty much everything around on some level. I mean, even that one behind there that you helped me co-write, we've got ultimately the story, as it will turns out by the end of it, is very much about this woman who meets another woman and thinks she may be the one. That's ultimately what it comes down to. I mean, you've got all kinds of other stuff going around, aliens and ghosts and blah blah blah, but that's the core story. You know,
It's a date.
as it turns out, yeah. And it's, you know, I think that's, so yeah, it's there all the time on some level. Sometimes subtle, sometimes not subtle. Like the new writing is very much no subtlety there at all. But that's kind of fun too sometimes, because it's nice, just, you know, no messing around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've slightly touched on this already, I think, just in when you've spoken about sort of how you approach, I suppose, how you approach your sexuality in your general life. But do you experience personal prejudice still in your life?
It's funny, as a by and large, I never really have. I see it every day on some level. So not in my house, because I don't go very far these days, because who does? I don't even see it at work necessarily. You hear this usual silly go joke, you're so gay, and all that kind of, the usual, you know, usually unintentionally offensive stuff, which to me then, why don't take offense at it? Because if they're not intended to offend, then don't take offense. They don't necessarily mean anything by it. They're just people talking nonsense, you know. I personally, not really, apart from that one case I told you about a little while ago. No, in my own experience, most people don't give a crap. You know, in work, I've never come out per se, but certain people have found out because they've become friends with me on Facebook and whatnot. And it's just little, I make little comments now and then. Like yesterday, we're playing Uno, like we do every day we're at work if we get a break. Big game, really crazy game. And they're all like, "Oh, got you." And I was like, "Right." I said, "No more Mr. Nice Guy," you know. And you get like, just brief, just very brief, and then they carry on. Because they're like, you know. So but no, I personally, not really.
Is it a shame, do you think, that I'm going off piste again, but is it a shame that that kind of coming out is still a thing? I mean, we had this issue recently with Rebel Wilson, just appalling behaviour from the newspapers, and the fact that do like homosexuals still feel that they have to make it expressly known that's who they are?
I remember,
because I mean, I would never go into work and say, "Hi, I'm Tim," you know. I suppose I wouldn't go and say, "Hi, I'm Tim, I'm straight," blah blah blah. I suppose during conversation I may say, it may come out that, you know, I've got a wife and kids and stuff like that, so the assumption is there from that. But
well,
it's a shame that gay people seem to be expected to come out and say, "Hi, this is me, this is what I am."
Well, I jokingly, somewhat jokingly, as my mate, I do this to a friend of mine all the time. He thinks he thinks I'm serious, but it's just not really that serious. Where I always say, well, I always assume everyone's gay until they tell me otherwise, because people generally assume you're all straight. So I just decide to assume everyone's gay until I'm proven otherwise. I don't really, but you know, I meet some guys, I'm thinking, oh well, he should be, but that's a whole different issue. Because you know, we all have our moments, right? Yeah, it's absolutely a shame. I remember before I came out personally, so we're talking early 2000s, probably about 2000, maybe 99. I was chatting to another Doctor Who fan I met through Gallifrey, Outpost Gallifrey at the time. And I remember him telling me, he's a gay bloke from Australia, about how, you know, coming out is, you don't just come out and that's it. You coming out every day, you know. Yeah. And at the time, I'm like,
you kind of you covered that a little bit when you spoke to Joe Lidster, didn't you?
Yeah,
the fact that
absolutely. You know, I think because it didn't make sense to me at the time. Of course, I haven't since come to peace with who I am a long time ago now, 21 years ago now. Wow. God, that time flew by, didn't it? I had obviously a dark beard then. I get it now. Every time you meet people, there's always that thing. I mean, if it's just a casual meet, generally not. But if it's somebody you may become friends with, or colleague with, or write with, or what, you know, if you know somebody, you meet them more regularly, eventually, not least the discussion necessarily, but certainly there's a part of you that thinks, well, I'm going to have to tell them at some point, because if you don't, and then they find out, sometimes they could react like, oh, well, you hid it from me, which is nonsense, of course. But you can get that. Or you get some people can be like, oh, well, does that mean you fancy me? It's like, no. I mean, there's one dude, right? I've said this to people all the time, because again, you can't take this all too seriously and take it to heart too much, because people are just people and don't always necessarily mean to be offensive. It's just some people don't understand and they can't necessarily express what they're trying to express.
So just can't articulate properly, can they?
People like, there was this, a few guys over the years I've met, and they found out I'm gay, and they're like, like there's one at work actually does that. He jokes around, but I shut him up every time. He's like, what? And I'm like, dude. So what? It goes, look, gay, not blind, and he just like, and then they get offended because you don't fancy them. You're like, well, what way do you want it, man? You don't want me to fancy you, but because I'm not fancying you, now you're offended because you don't. So, I treat it mostly as not a joke, but very lightly, because I'm not bothered. But coming out, unfortunately, it is a shame. But again, like the whole segregation thing, I'm like, what's the solution? Is there really a way to fix this? I'd like it to be a case. I think, as Joe Litzer said, and I think he's mostly right, that today's generation, whatever they're called now, Z, what are they these days? Whatever generation, I don't know what generation is. But by and large, they don't care. And people don't need to come out as such. But then I say this, but then of course they must have to, because at some point, if they've decided they're bi, or they've realized they're gay, or they're whatever they've realized they are, they're going to have to tell people at some point, which is essentially coming out. It may not be that big emotional outburst where it was like, oh, I always knew, big hug. Because there's always one that says that. I always knew. Right. So I think there's always going to be that on some level.
Yeah.
But then that's no different, like you say, when you meet people and then eventually you talk about your wife and kids, and then people will be like, oh, you're straight. I think that's where we need to get to. Certainly myself, like I said, when I meet people and I've not get to know them for a while, I don't like, oh, by the way, I should let you know. It's just little things I say, little things I do, and they will work it out, like things like just silly stuff at work, for instance, where one of the guys would say to the girls, like, oh, talking, I've had some sort of sexual innuendo, just joking around, banter, right? Never really offense. It's just banter. And what do you reckon? And I'm like, yeah, not going to work for me. They're all like, what? I'm like, yeah, I gave them girls a long time ago. And they're like, oh, it's little things like that. So it's still coming out technically, but it's not a big emotional outburst or a big dramatic moment. It's like writing, isn't it? Real character moments are not dramatic. They're just normal. They're just buried in there. It's just little moments. Because I hate to quote the doctor here, but life is about the small moments. It's those little things. That's what to make life important. So I think I think that is the only solution, that you don't make a big deal of it. You just little things, and people will get to the point where hopefully one day people will be like, oh, right, you're gay. Okay, cool. It just clicks.
So it's something that becomes as natural as me talking about my wife and kids.
Absolutely. So that's where we need to get to, I think. But it's tough because, as you say, the press and the media are still making a huge deal of it.
Exactly. It's all judgmental, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a tough one. There's no easy answer, I think, sadly.
Okay. All right. Here go back to a writing question. Can you imagine a time when you would no longer want to write?
Yeah, when it stops being fun.
Okay.
I think that's basically the bottom line.
Good.
I'll go back.
I can agree. I can agree with you on that one, because that was also how I approached when I years ago when I was acting. That was my approach then as well, when it stopped being fun.
I'll tell a story, right? And
not
to speak ill of the dead. It's a moment that happened. It's real. I mean, I love this guy, but it's just a moment, you know. Craig Hinton, you know the name, of course.
I do, yeah. I never knew him, but I know the name.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we'd met a few times at the tavern in London, because back in the day, we really knew everybody. I suppose we sort of all still don't know each other now for the internet. And, you know, lovely guy. We've always got on really well. You know, he always found it amazing that I loved God Engine, for instance, which I don't actually have a copy of anymore.
I like God Engine as well.
I think I sold that to somebody. Yeah, but
yeah,
I really enjoyed it. I've always thought it's a very clever
like
way of having the Daleks without having the Daleks in it. You know, it's a good book, nice exploration of Martian culture. You know, he was very much a key element of that, how we understand the Martians within Doctor Who context. And I think it's when I got my first professional piece published by Big Finish in the Repercussions anthology. I was all over the net, like, yeah, you know, big deal, you know, it's professional, you know, and it's Doctor Who, so fucking excellent. It's back when Doctor Who was a huge thing for me, obviously. And I remember, I think it was on Gallifrey Bay, Outpost Gallifrey, I must remember where we are. It might have been in person, but I'm pretty sure it was online. And he had a moan at me about going on about it all the time. And I said to him, because he sounded quite bitter and annoyed, you know. But again, it could be misreading. That's why I think it might have been in person, because I really felt that he was proper like, oh, for God's sake, shut up about it. God's sake, yeah, you got a story published, woohoo, you know. And I said to him, I goes, look, Craig, mate, I goes, when I'm no longer excited about getting stuff published, then I know it's time to quit, you know. And I said to him, like, maybe if you've lost that kind of passion, maybe it's time for you to move on to something else too. Because if everything you write is not a big deal for you, then clearly the passion is gone, I think. And that's something I, you know, today I still am very much. I mean, as you well know, there's been a few times where I've started a book or a short story or whatever, actually short story, novella and book, where I just sort of lost the passion for it for whatever reason. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just not going to get this done because I just don't have the passion for this story anymore. And 3 times, just like, Tim, you're like, oh yeah, I'll do it. And you've done that with Ordinary Man, you did that with Fang Rock up there, and the Arrival short story.
That's right.
That's 3 times. It might be enough.
Yes.
I think that's the only 3 so far.
Oh no, there was the Lucy Wilson short in the lockdown.
Oh yes, the dinosaur one. No.
Yeah.
Was it the dinosaur one?
The dinosaur invasion one.
Yeah. Right.
Dinosaurs in London, was it?
Yeah, I think
Dinosaur
it was.
Invasion,
Yeah.
something like that. Dinosaur Invasion of London.
Yes. But yeah, so you know, whenever I've got to the point where there was a time when I was just battled on and carried on. Nowadays, I'm like, it's not. I say it's not because I don't need the money as such. It's more a case of if my heart's not in it, then there's no point because that will show the near product.
That's cool.
You know.
But also I think on certainly, I'm not sure necessarily with the Arrival, but certainly with the other projects. When I've picked that up from you and it's come back to you, you've gone through it. You've had that enthusiasm again. Yeah. Because I suppose it's a slightly different reaction because you're looking at someone else's piece of work based on
I've got my head ideas as well.
So I've taken some joy out of the fact that you've had a reignited interest in it at the end, and it makes it feel much more a collaborative piece of work, and it's not me just picking up things you don't want to do, because that would be an unfair.
It's
That would
funny.
be an unfair.
It's funny.
Unfair
Actually.
assessment.
I was just scanning through the Fang Rock one just before you came on, and it's the same with Ordinary Life, Ordinary Man, wherever we finally
Ordinary
called it. Ordinary
It
whatever
was going to be an ordinary life.
We had this discussion before, haven't we?
We had this discussion before,
we had that discussion in the video we never used.
No, it was in the Curse of Fenric.
Oh, it was it?
One,
okay,
because it was talking about how Fenric had changed its name.
Yeah, we did that one that didn't work out at all. We just like, yeah, let's just get some.
Oh no, that was terrible.
Let's try something again. Let's try again. We'll have to release outtakes of that one day. Oh man, that was a mess. What's it saying? Ordinary Life.
You were looking at Fang Rock the other day.
Right, so Fang Rock and Ordinary Life. And even at the time as well, I'm reading like what you've done, and in my head I'm thinking, oh, I wouldn't have gone there with it. Because obviously I knew the story I wanted to tell, even though I'd lost the desire for it. Obviously I still knew. But as again, me and Sean discussed this many times, of just generally in writing, that the whole point of getting somebody else to write is because you want to see what they bring to the table. And they're not always going to bring what you would bring to the table. Sometimes I'll do stuff that you're like, that's not what I would have done. But then again, I'm like that when I watch TV. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that's not where I would have gone in the story. But that's where this writer's going, and that's perfectly legit, you know. Yeah. But the end product being, you know, as you say, a collaborative effort, and I think that's quite fun. But which only underscores my point being that if I lose the passion for something, then I'll stop. But writing, because I haven't, other than like doing edit and rewrites and whatnot, I've not really done any proper writing. It seems like a long time. I did a short story in a year, and I'm doing the follow-up book. And, you know, there are days when I'm like, nah, can't be asked with it, you know. Then there are days like, especially at the beginning of a piece, I think, it takes a little while to get yourself into it, you know. It takes a while to get a sense of the characters. So like the first chapter, for instance, I know the majority of that will be changed when I get back to it. When I get to the end, I'll go back, because that's just me working out who these characters are. And so a lot of the
journey
stuff
you've got to go on, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's the journey you've got to go on. You've got to start somewhere.
Especially if they're new characters as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff,
it doesn't have to stay written.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that's in the first chapter will be explored later in the book, so I won't need it in the first chapter. It's just me getting it down there. So yeah, as long as the passion's there, then I'll keep doing it. I don't think there'll ever be the passion for writing in general go, but certainly for certain projects will probably dissipate over time. But then, you know, like the co-writing stuff that we do, I may come back to it later and go, well, actually, my head's back in the game now. But unfortunately, Tim's written it, so just got to go with it now, you know. Because that
it is what it is.
So yes, when the passion goes, so will I.
Okay. And what would you like to be your legacy?
This sounds like a wrap-up question. When you die next week, which I don't intend to.
I don't know.
If I do, then you know it's your fault.
I'll just point out to the viewer at this point, I don't know anything that Andy doesn't.
I'm sure you know lots of stuff I don't know.
Well,
I imagine.
This is true, yes.
Okay, my legacy, God. To be being a cantankerous git. That'll probably be my legacy. Certainly among certain fans, and that's fine.
Well, if you're going to have a legacy, you might as well make it a 3-syllabled one. Or 4-syllabled. For God's sake, I can't count.
Yeah, 4. So, I don't know. I would, hopefully my legacy would just be, he was a good guy, ultimately. I mean, my legacy, it's not going to be my writing, I don't think, unless I do something that's, you know, gets that big 6-figure sum where it's worldwide, you know, at least international on some level. But then, I suppose, you know, what we do, you know, there's a lot of, you know, Doctor Who fiction that's been published over the decades that still people love. by writers who no longer write. I think of some of Paul Leonard's early stuff, like the Turing Test. Phenomenally good book. But most people outside of Doctor Who will know of it. But
This is true.
certain section of Doctor Who fans and Philium, will have loved it at the time and may have found it since, and that's probably no more less truth than for what we do. At the moment, the reach may not be huge, unfortunately, but people are still finding Leopard Stewart today, like early stuff 5 years ago. I know people pick up the first book again and they like, I just read so-and-so. I'm like, God, that was so long ago. Or they maybe pick up Space 99 book, which was even longer ago, or even a Seeker. Or so the Big Finish stuff I've done over the years. But I don't know, I suppose these things will always exist on some level, as long as Doctor exists, I think. Even if one day in the far, far future, Kenda Gel's no longer a thing, I'm no longer a thing, none of it's a thing, somebody may pick up the rights to these books and just reprint them. Like some of the older books get reprinted now, by different publishers. Who is it, Random House that does a lot of the old stuff now? I think it's Random House.
I think so, yeah.
Whereas back in there it was Target, it's an imprint of a fairly small company at the time. So I think, conceivably decades on, these things will still be remembered and be read. So I suppose in a sense that's a legacy of sorts, But personally, I just hope, I would hope ultimately it comes down to people who know me will know that I was a good, not selfish, despite what my mother seems to still think of me. Don't even know. It's a weirdo thing. I think she just remembers me as this young kid that I was, or she projects a lot because people do that all the time. But people who know me, they find out that I'm very, I'm always giving in a sense. I'm always doing stuff for other people, helping other people out. And I'm very much out there making people laugh, because life is full of joy. So why not spread it around a bit? I mean, yeah, it's full of shit too, but there's lots of great, funny, silly moments in this world. So you've got to just, embrace them. So I'd hope that'd be my legacy, if anything.
That's a good legacy. Share the joy.
Just a nice guy who just, I mean, among certain fans, I'm sure it'll be something else entirely, because I certainly got a few noses out of joints in the last few years, but yeah.
I've seen the odd comment here and there from people who clearly don't know better.
Yeah, who've never met me and don't know me and would never say boo to me in person. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. So
we've got,
when are you
say 10 minutes, yeah?
10 minutes, all right. Oh, we'll be quick with these last few questions.
So that you got time to get back to your work and stuff.
When are you happiest?
So many answers to that.
Clean answers only.
Okay, I shall not mention anything else. But when I'm happiest in a pure sense, I mean, it's impure. I'm going to be really horrible and twee and say generally just am, to be fair.
That's good. That's quite admirable, actually.
I'm just,
if you ask.
There's very little in life that winds me up to the point where I get really depressed or fed up. I mean, sure, there's been times, I've gone through depression over the years in many ways, but fortunately, and I know I am very fortunate, I've got the strength of character that I've always known when I'm there and been able to drag myself out of it every time. Because generally, I'm very content with life. Life, as I say, life is as daft as anything usually. So why get too worked up? There's stuff that works me up sometimes, but it doesn't last for very long, not really. In the internet, there's all kinds of people who, as it were, trigger each other. And there's some stuff that I come across and thinking, oh my God, you're so stupid. But what I tend to do a lot now, so I don't get caught up in nonsense, is if somebody's posted something that's clearly not true, I will literally quote the tweet as opposed to screen cap and share like so many people do, which I think is a bit of a coward way of doing it. I
Yeah.
will literally quote a tweet and then put my response above. You probably would have seen a few days where they're talking about something or a doctor which is absolutely factually entirely wrong. It's like, well, actually, this is what really happened. And all you've got to do is look up anyway. There's books and books of this stuff just to get the truth back out there and not get wound up by it. And usually they don't respond to it anyway. But yeah, honestly, generally, I'm quite a content and happy soul. Life is too short, you know. Why spend all your time getting all fed up with stuff? And I tend to. Now, let me tell you another little story, right? And excuse the very explicit word coming up, but you know, this is always labeled not for kids, so it's okay.
I'll try not to be shocked.
Years and years and years. I hate this word, so you can see where this word's coming. But it needs to be said because context it one of your works otherwise. Because this is what, again, years back, me and Gary Russell were talking about. I can't remember what, we were just having a conversation about something, and we just got into internet personas, you know. And he said to me, he goes, "It's interesting." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Generally, your online persona tends to come across as you're a bit of a cunt." And I laughed. I'm like, he goes, "But," because this is, I think, one of the first times he met me. And he said to me, he goes, "But you're actually quite a personable guy. You're very much not like that." And I'm like, "Cool, I'll take that." I goes, "That's fine, because if it keeps the idiots away from me, I don't care." Because usually the people who perceive you in such a way, they've got a gripe with you about something, and you're never going to change their mind anyway. But like, well, if it keeps the stupid people away from me, the ignorant, angry people away, then cool, I'm happy with that, you know, that reputation. But I'm not that guy. You know, that's what part of these videos is all about, you know, to show most things don't bother me. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, I've got another question for you then. What frightens you most in life?
Oh, grief, nothing.
Good.
I'm really
good. No, that's right. Doesn't have to be any more than that.
No. Nothing really. I often think of that. It's like, you know, you watch these types of films and books and whatnot where people face their biggest fears and stuff, you know, the type.
Yeah.
I always watch it and think to myself, which again is about imprinting your own self on what you're watching. And I think to myself, is there really anything? What is my darkest fear? What would it be? And I'm like, I don't know. So it must be stuff, you know, unconsciously, like stuff that come up in your dreams and stuff. But dreams tend to go so quickly, sort of don't really remember anyway. Honestly, I can't think of anything that frightens me about life, really. You know, you just life is what it's. Is he grey? Your cat? He just walked past you.
Oh, it's
Grey?
Luna. She's chasing a. She's kind of. She's very dark grey, sort of dark misty colour. She's chasing a fly.
Well, as somebody said, it wouldn't be YouTube, it wouldn't be Zoom without a cat.
No, River, our other cat, is asleep upstairs.
River.
Rory, our third cat, we haven't seen for months, so we don't know.
A pattern of name in here.
Yeah, there is that. Right. Come on then. Anyway, this isn't about my cats.
You sure?
Here's a good one.
Go on.
Which literary figure do you think is most overrated?
Oh, well, you know I'm going to say. Other than Douglas Adams, because you knew that was on the list.
Well, I had a feeling you'd probably say Douglas Adams, but I thought I'd throw it in there anyway, just in case there was someone else. You know, Dickens is a pile of shite or something.
Okay, Anne Rice.
Anne Rice.
That's some good stuff, don't get me wrong, but unfortunately, she was, I think, generally overrated. Stephen King the same, to be fair. A lot of the big names often are, because they were good once, because they obviously got themselves this amazing publishing deal. But I think there's a trap where when you like Stephen King, he'll write a book, and they're not always the same. Some are really good, some generally not so much these days, where he's guaranteed to sell ridiculous amount of copies because it's Stephen King. And
it becomes a production line, doesn't it?
You can fall in the trap where you just crap because you're like, meh, I'm going to sell 1 million copies, I'm going to make this much out of it, so what do I care? And I think that can be a trap. I want to bring it back to Doctor Who just for, for the fans.
Okay.
And not state the obvious one of Moffat. But I didn't say that. Although
Douglas Adams includes Doctor Who anyway, doesn't it?
Yeah. But I would say Moffat, personally, I think he's highly overrated. But then that's true of a lot of Doctor Who writers and producers. They've got people who worship them, and you've got people who hate them. So what's overrated anyway, really? It's all subjective. Because you hear this, like somebody the other day said, what was it? They said something was very underrated. I think it was an episode of Star Trek. It's the underrated episode, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, underrated by who?
Oh, I saw that. I saw you. Yeah. I saw your response to it.
I don't
know the episode in. I don't know the episode in question at all because I don't know Star Trek very well. But
generally, highly regarded episode, certainly within on everybody I've ever spoken to about Star Trek, and I've read about Star Trek. It's always up there. But
that's the problem with echo chambers, isn't it?
I think
if you exist in a social media echo chamber, then potentially the views that you share are
that's true too.
Shared by the people
this
that
is
you interact with.
From before social media. I remember it's always like on the polls and interviews and stuff, always regarded very highly by people who made it and people who watched it and whatever. But again, the person who said this, presumably the people he's associated with don't think much of it. Hello, pussycat.
Luna, are you going to meet Andy? Come here.
No, I'm not. Actually.
Come and meet Andy.
Hello, puss. Cooey.
Yeah?
No.
No, you're not interested? All right, go away before you scratch my legs.
My cats do the same. They're like, no, I just stand in front of the camera instead. What's underrated? Equally, what's overrated? It's all subjective, isn't it? But yeah, I would say those three I mentioned, though, because they obviously are highly rated in the sense, certainly two of them are highly rated in the sense of they are multi-million-dollar selling authors, which obviously means somebody rates them. Douglas Adams, I would say overrated, because again, mostly he has a very passionate fan base to this day.
He does. This is true.
I think,
although it's spread not just across his books, it is spread across his radio series and other things as well. So I'll say he's overrated, but I will acknowledge the fact that even though I think he's extremely overrated, I think he's very good at the scenes he writes. Can be really great stuff. He's good at good character stuff, amazing dialogue, all this. But I'm pretty sure that even he admitted that his plots are shit. He wasn't a plot man. He was a scene with a little bit of connective tissue. I mean, Hitchhiker's Guide, there's no real discernible plot. Certainly in the original radio version. It's a
characters and the moments.
It's a sequence of moments there's no particular story driving it forward.
Yeah, City of Death was extremely highly rated once upon a time, although I think largely because there was nothing on TV at the time. So I think that helped. But I think if that hadn't happened,
there's also the fact that that Russell T Davies made no secret of the fact that it was one of the stories that was it Jane Tranter said basically, if you bring in Doctor Who back, make it like this.
Oh, really?
In that kind of sort of pace and banter, humor, style, but also with the dramatic moments as well, because that's my leg. It's got good dramatic moments in terms of like Scarleone's
That thing
reveal
you're
and
a
stuff
cat
like
was a
that.
good example of lovely, fun moments in life.
Yeah, well,
Not from your
I-
point of view, maybe.
I can show you that.
Oh, I
which-
used to have
which
loads of those for my kittens. Yeah.
thankfully is not from the cat. That's from the brambles at the front. But
Oh. See, now that would have
yeah.
made me laugh too. See,
Would it?
when I say about life being full of silly moments and things that make me laugh, right? I always tell
Life
the
full of other
story, for
people being in
instance.
pain and you laughing. Yeah, all right,
Yeah.
fair enough.
I remember in London, back when I used to work early mornings, right? On the way to work at like 5:30 in the morning, I think it was. And somebody was across the other street, opposite side of the street from me. And they walked into the lamppost straight down. And I'm just like,
Brilliant.
they got back up.
Yeah.
I walked right back into it. Down again. And I'm just like laughing. Because I'm like,
Were they blind?
no.
I was gonna say that would.
But then, as I always say, right, and I've told this story to many people over the years, in '96, when I broke my ankle, I fell out of this tree. I barely got in the tree, but that's another story. And I was laying there, and I tried to get up, couldn't get up. Took my shoe off. My foot's facing a very interesting angle that I've never seen before.
Oh,
Turns out I
I'm no good with stuff like that.
Turns out I completely destroyed the talus, which is this bone in the ankle that you're not supposed to even damage. So.
Okay, yeah. No more details.
I was laying there, I was laughing because I didn't feel it go. I was like, right. Oh well. And my mates walking around thinking I'm joking. They realize I'm not joking and they're like panicking around me. I'm like, nah, because I just thought it was quite amusing. I mean, it hurt when they put it back in place. Oh yeah,
I bet.
That hurt. But even then, at the time, a friend of mine, she's I'm taking the gas and she goes, oh, it sounds like you're pregnant. I'm like, and then she's like, oh, you can hold my hand if you want, because that's going to help. So I'm like, all right then. Back in place. And I looked at her, I'm like, oh, that hurt. Obviously, I'm laughing with the gas. And she's just like, yeah, I know. And I think that's hysterical. So yeah, small moments, man. What's your question? Overrated. Yeah. I will say this about overrated stuff. Sharda. I think had that actually been finished, it wouldn't be remotely as regarded as highly as it is nowadays. Because it's not all that. No more than seeing a death is. It's okay. But every time I've seen it all put together, you're like, yeah, it's actually kind of crap, isn't it? Really, as a story. It's just, it's got this mythical thing about it now because
I couldn't agree with you less.
Oh.
I think Sharda's wonderful.
Controversy.
Not just because it's Douglas Adams. I do no. I am the 6-part sort of animated, completed version, as it were, on the season 17 Blu-ray is wonderful. I think it would easily have been the best of the Graham Williams 6-parters because Armageddon Factor is terrible.
Yes,
the Invasion of Time is great at the start but fizzles out a bit too much, even though it's got some really powerful moments. I think Sharda would have wiped the floor with the rest of them.
But that's not
personally
put it up against nothing very good, though, is it? So it
would
have been better than two shit stories.
Yeah, so it's
faint praise, right?
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, but
speaking of overrated, hey.
Anyway, I've got to go. I've got a meeting in 5 minutes.
You got 5 minutes, okay?
Yeah, man. We're going to have to end on this disagreeable note. So thank you very much for your frank answers for the last hour and 20 minutes, or however long it's been.
Frank by name, frank by nature.
Indeed.
That's me. Yeah, this has been good, man.
It has. No, I hope it's been interesting from your perspective as well.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to just ask you all the kind of ask you all the usual questions. I wanted to try and put something interesting in there as well.
Talk publicly, as it were, about stuff that lots of people know, but nobody necessarily on the internet knows, because it's hard to convey a lot of nuance in anything online, obviously. So yeah. There's a few bits that I'm hoping people might find kind of interesting that they may not have known. That might offer insight into this person that is me, that people seem to have, some people seem to have very much a dislike for, just because I happen to be in control of something that they apparently think should be free.
Yes.
But apparently that's not really how life works. Sorry. For you people out there who are among those. Hi, Mr. Controversy. That was fun. Oh man.
Anyway,
that was a good moment. But let's not talk about that. That could be another conversation one day. So Tim, thank you. To everybody at home watching, all three of you probably. I hope you found this interesting, that you may have learned something, that maybe it might have helped you with something you're struggling with, that, shows that sometimes life isn't that difficult, But yeah, it's been fun. Tim, it's been interesting. Thanks for your questions. We'll have to go deeper next year. I'll ask you some questions.
Oh yes, my accidental revelations. Yeah, never mind. Never mind.
You did it. But anyway, yes, let's wrap this up. Again, thank you everybody at home. I've been Andy. Tim's been Tim. Until next time, Tim and I, when we'll discuss actually something about TV probably, but we might not. We'll decide in 3 weeks.
We've got a few things lined up, haven't we?
We've got a few ideas.
Star Trek Next Gen.
Yeah, we've got a few ideas, but whether they happen, that's we'll see. I mean, we may have decided another discussion point that we might discuss instead. Who knows? Because between the last one and this one, we've we'll do this. Oh no, we'll do this now. No, we'll do this now. So a lot can happen in 3 weeks. Clearly. Okay, well, so I've been Andy, Tim's been Tim, and we shall catch you in 4 weeks. Until then, goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.